Welcome everybody to the first Fitbit for the Planet Masterclass in Behavior Mapping for Climate Action Design. I'm so excited to have you here. And what we're going to dive into is a systematic process of going through 96 different techniques that are based on evidence-based behavioral psychology, gamification, and social marketing, and all in a structure that you can go through to make sure your climate or environmental project actually succeeds in getting people to take action. And the reason why I'm so interested in this space of behavioral psychology and gamification, because every time I learn more about it, I learn the techniques, I see all of us who are working on climate impact and our environmental change aspirations, and I see everybody like we're only working at a fraction of our potential. And I can see us on this ladder where I think we're all only at about a 3 out of 10 of what we're capable of. And if we can start understanding how to tap into human psychology and how to build better creative campaigns, I really think all of us can escalate all of the projects that we're working on, and we can have the kind of impact of our dreams we can really have, and we can unlock that, and we can unlock it in part through this process that I've put together. So just to go over what we've got coming up also in the Gamify the Planet group, my vision for this group is to turn into something that people are calling like a living lab, where we learn the techniques, the evidence-based techniques of social influence, of environmental psychology, and then we get together and ideate and we design these ideas. In every single academic study, there is at least one great idea that shifts people into action. But we don't just want to learn and design. What we want to do is actually then take these ideas. I'll do up my own ideas to share, but you do up your ideas as well. And then we actually get out into the real world and test them out on real humans. And then every month we come back and we talk about how successful we were in actually testing them out and what the responses were and what worked and what didn't work. And what we've got coming up next month is Sustainability Street, the gamification of the neighborhood. I've been working on this on and off for a couple of years. I think it's a super exciting space, and I'm really excited to launch that as our next theme. But to kick off for the first theme, we are going to be diving into the introduction, the framework, which is the behavior mapping process. And also part of being a Patreon member is not just the masterclass. I'm putting together all of these different gifts and things, creative projects, games, etc., that are almost finished. And I'll be able to actually give them as a free gift with your membership every month. Sometimes there'll be real physical things, sometimes just digital, but there's a lot of things coming up in the pipeline for the group. So what the behavior mapping process is try to think of it like baking a cake. You've got all of these different ingredients. All of these ingredients are like a key into the lock of the human mind that gets people to do stuff. There are a lot of them and they all work in different ways. And then you've got to look through all of them, or we have to look through all of them, and then kind of turn them into a recipe. You pick out which ones that you want. Sometimes you might only have 3 techniques that will be the right ones to use for your project. Sometimes you might use 10 or 15 techniques. But you have to go through them all to figure out which are the right ones for the job. And then you put them together in a really elegant idea, and that will be your cake. That's your idea. By laying them all out the way that I've done in this 10-step process with all the techniques, you can go through and then you can pick out the ones that you want to use. And that's why there's the poster and the card set. So you can have the poster down, you can go through the cards, put them down, and then figure out the 5 or the 10 that you want to use that is going to work for your particular social change mission. The reason why environmental psychology and gamification is so interesting or so necessary to do is this thing called the value action gap, which you may have heard of me talk about before, but if you haven't come across the value action gap before, it's this really tricky phenomenon that comes up largely in anybody who's working in environmental change. And that is, we assume that if we just educate people about the polar bears or about the planet or about the trees, they will be concerned. And that's true. When you educate people about environmental issues, they do become concerned. But this is where it falls off the cliff. Just because people are emotionally concerned because they care doesn't mean they actually take action. And there are some very real reasons behind this, but we can get around when we understand the neuroscience of the brain. And so what usually happens, the way most people who work environmental change work on, is we work on trying to educate people about the issue. We're trying to educate people about climate change or get them to believe in climate change. We work on getting financial incentives, getting the government to give financial incentives for green change. And then a lot of people work on policy and the law. all important and necessary, but these are also difficult, expensive, slow, and they're not always available. And they are not the entire picture of what builds social movements and what builds change. And when we're only looking at those three techniques, those three tools in our toolbox, we're missing out on this vast psychological engine of the human motivational machine. We can use techniques that are free, easy, effective, and fast and fun, and we can do now that can build that social momentum, but we have to learn how to tap into these techniques. And so what I've seen from studying this space is that the brain has 5 main motivational drivers for action and behavior. This is not just education, this is actually action. So the first one, we are enormously motivated by social position. This is how we compare to other people. Tamara's project is called the New Joneses. I was just going to say, people compare themselves to the Joneses. It is one of the most powerful things that humans do, is the way that we compare ourselves. The second one is trust. We are social animals. Primarily, our social relationships are built on the trust that we have with other people. So anything that involves a promise or a pledge, making a promise to another person, or even just to yourself, triggers a very, very deep psychological driver in humans. The third is goals and rewards. The human brain works as a goal-seeking entity. We come up with a goal, we fixate on that goal, and then we work towards achieving that goal, and our brain has an inbuilt reward mechanism that rewards us when we achieve that goal. This is the simple thing of having a to-do list and crossing off the to-do list and having that need to finish the to-do list. And then when you finally cross off the last one, you get that sense of satisfaction. That is the mental mechanism that most games are built on, that the dopamine system is built on, that we want to sort of hack into that goal-seeking behavior. The fourth one is imitation, is that humans copy each other. We don't even realize how much we copy each other. We copy each other's body language. We copy music taste. We copy the way people are sitting or standing in a room. Any ways that we can encourage imitation is a powerful way to drive behavior, possibly when people don't even realize that they're doing it. And the other fifth one is groups. People work in groups, they copy each other through groups, they do something called norming to group behavior. So any ways you can get people together in groups, get them to talk about something, commit to something, copy each other within a group, is also going to be really powerful. So the techniques we're going to go into are part of these, or branch from these 5 different psychological drivers that lead humans to action. Not necessarily more education, but that will drive people directly to take action. And it really starts to make sense, this type of design, when you take a bit of a deeper look into the human mind. You can see the human brain that's made in 3 different levels. The outer level of the brain is our intellectual place of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. That's where we do language, calculation, executive functioning, planning. And when we're trying to educate people, we are tapping into the prefrontal cortex. Now, it's a powerful part of the brain, but it's not the deepest part of the brain. Evolutionary speaking, it's a more modern part of the brain. So it doesn't necessarily trigger our emotions and our survival instincts. And that is partly why the value action gap happens, because when we're only stimulating the intellectual part of the brain, we're not going into these deeper parts of the brain that stimulate action. And so environmental education often just becomes like a fun learning exercise, not necessarily leading people to take action. So we want to move deeper into the emotional, or the limbic system in the brain, which governs our emotions. And then we can move even deeper still into the reptilian brain, which is to do with our survival. And there are ways of tapping into these deeper drivers in humans. And so what we want to do is activate the dopamine reward circuit. This is made up of the prefrontal cortex, another part of the limbic system called the nucleus accumbens, and this very ancient reptilian center of the brain called the ventral tegmental area. And dopamine governs all of human behavior and motivation. It's a really fascinating thing to start to understand. And what is particularly important with our work when we're designing for environmental change is understanding that dopamine drives us to achieve a goal. So when we're laying out the environmental actions that we want people to do, we want to lay them out so they work with this dopamine pathway. We have the goal, we're tracking progress towards the goal, we're giving rewards, we're encouraging sustained motivation, and we're encouraging action to make it towards that goal. And this master line here that I'll be going on over and over is this statement: tracking progress towards a goal. That's what we want to do. It may sound simple, but it is so frequently not done. And I would say very, very rarely is it done. Looking at this deeper part of the brain called the ventral tegmental area, that is a core to the dopamine reward pathway, is dopamine is a really interesting chemical. It has an amazing side, but it also has a dark side. And so this particular brain circuit is responsible for cocaine addiction, romantic love, that intense instinct of needing to be with somebody, and addiction. It can completely override somebody and make them do just about anything when this circuit is stimulated. When it's working in a healthy way, it is what drives motivation, our focus, our tenacity to work towards a goal, and it is also what gets us to enjoy these rewards when we achieve this goal. And if we're not stimulating dopamine, like we're not getting people into action. It's a core design question to ask, is it stimulating the dopamine reward system? A way to think of it, to frame all of this type of design, is to really deeply come to understand this idea of causality. What is the causal mechanism behind how you want people to change? And often we have a really fuzzy understanding of what causality is. Why does one person compost? Why does one person put on solar? Why does one person go for the EV? Why does one person vote green, or one person believe in climate change and one person not? Why does one person go vegetarian and not another? We can start the process of really deeply understanding causality so we can start designing for it. And so what I want everybody here to really take on is to really embrace this idea of the creativity of causality. And that means we find the causal mechanism. We really understand what it is that really drives people. And then we get as creative as we can, and we augment that mechanism, that causal mechanism, to make an amazing campaign that is going to actually push on the pressure point of what that is, and actually make something awesome that really, really works. And when I've done this really creatively, really understanding causal mechanism, it just catches fire. Like, it's amazing. People will talk about only getting a 5% or a 2% response for something. When I feel like I've done this really well and put these two things together, I'm getting 70 or 80% response rates. I don't mean like an email response rate. I mean like somebody taking action, that the shift happening with somebody where they're just like, oh my God, I just have to do this thing now. I have to compost. I have to get this EV, whatever it is. It's enormously powerful. It really is like putting a key into the lock of the human mind. Speaking of causal mechanisms, this is what we're going to be doing in this group, diving into the academic literature from the Journal of Environmental Psychology and the Journal of Environment and Behavior. This is where we understand what these deep theories and these deep drivers are, so we can start designing really cool ideas for them. So if you haven't already, get out your behavior map. There are links to downloading the high resolution PDF in the Patreon group. They should also be on the calendar invite. If you've had the printed one arrive already, you'll be able to use that one too. And the process we're going to go through is looking at the God metric, going over to the actor, and then working through these steps from first contact all the way to here, to data, to action, to progress, to nudges, enhances, and rewards. In this session today, we're going to end at progress and rewards because there's a lot to get through. And the next session, we'll be doing nudges and enhances. And we just systematically go through every single step and every single technique, and we see which one will work for our project. So starting off with the God metric, the idea of this is to come up with one single metric that you want to change. Now, it might sound really obvious that you want to come up with one single metric, like maybe it's a plastic in the ocean, or it's the amount of trees in a city, or it's the amount of carbon emissions that come out of combustion cars. But you would be amazed how almost every single not-for-profit and startup and universities and governments really, really struggle to come up with this one single metric that they want to change, because we want to change all the metrics. We want to put them all together and make a big impact, or we're not quite sure exactly how to carve them up. Part of the art of this is really trying to niche down into one specific metric that you want to change and not mixing them together. So just get a pen and paper now and write down, where are we starting? Where is the data now? If we're looking at combustion cars, what is the carbon emissions from cars in our neighborhood for a single car, for a company, whatever? Figure out where it is, figure out how we track the progress, and then figure out what our goal is, what our destination is. One master progress bar, the God metric progress bar, that is the umbrella over the entire project. This might sound really, really simple, but it's amazing. I have actually never, ever seen this done really well for anything I've ever worked on or with any organization. It just feels like it's often an afterthought, or it's forgotten about, or perhaps it's there, or people aren't really working with it. But we really want this to be front and center to our project, so every single person is constantly having that goal-seeking mechanism activated when they're looking at it. A lot of people are really resistant to coming up with one particular metric. Me too. I want to work on all the metrics as well. But what you need to do if you want to do plastic and trees and carbon and water and all of the different things is niche down to one single one. Niche down as niche as you possibly can get to get started. Doesn't mean you can't do them later. And then achieve a result. If you want to get carbon out of cars, try to get 10 people to switch over to an EV. Not just put out content about EVs, but actually get 10 people to make the change, or a company or a fleet to, switch over all of their fleet or whatever. Just get some traction on that one thing, which will be a lot of work. Then after you've done that, then you can add water or air pollution or trees or plastic. Add something else after you've achieved that. Don't try to do them all at once. That's what you want to avoid, and go as small as possible so you can get that tiny little bit of traction, that little action threshold before you start adding more on. Because one single metric will have many, many actions attached to it. And part of the art of getting this process right is really understanding how many actions we are working with, and then trying to sort of cut them, prune them down, so we have less to work with, so we can come up with really laser focused, elegant solutions that are going to get these really high response rates, 50, 70, 80% of people responding the way that we want them to. And even in this example here, where I've got my city's CO2 emissions from vehicles, I mean, that's already going to have 20, 50 different actions. It's already going to have too many actions. So we have to get less than that. And when you start putting all of the different metrics together, each one of those has 50 or 100 actions attached to it. You end up with hundreds of actions, and it's just a huge mess of an unnavigatable mess of actions that you can't really design anything for. And it doesn't work on people because of these three principles. Cognitive load, which means if you're asking people to do more than one thing at a time, maybe three at the very most, it's just too much for them cognitively to take on, and they shut down. Decision fatigue, another psychological phenomenon. If you're asking people to constantly make decisions about things, they just get worn out and they'll stop doing it. And then also this third one, the attention economy. I mean, these days, everything is, can you grab people's attention? And if you're asking people to do a whole bunch of stuff, they're just going to block it out. That's why we have to be so surgical with designing for action. And so the broader the focus is, the weaker the solution. This might sound like I'm going on and on about this, perhaps too much, but it's just incredible how biased we are to wanting to go too broad and not stepping into the power of the niche. What also I notice is I've had a lot of different consulting calls in my own work, working for a lot of different organizations, is that we all start like this. We all start broad. And then as we get more experience, we start to niche down. So this is a natural design process. It's a natural human process to start off with all these metrics, kind of trying to be everything for everyone. You may have experienced this before when you're working on something and you tried to make it everything for everybody. And then moving down into what I call here a surgically elegant idea based on a single niche metric, a very specific type of person, and a singular action. And if you have some resistance to that, it's totally natural. We all start that way, but we all move towards being more specific. And I want you to think about it like a decryption process. Alan Turing, who built one of the first computers that decrypted military codes in the Second World War, think of it as a decryption machine, that you have this big social and environmental problem. And it has so many potential pathways, just like a computer that's trying to decrypt an algorithm or a code. And it just could be so many different things, how to unlock this machine. And so we want to just niche it down. We try something, we get smaller. We try something, we get smaller. We try another thing, we get smaller. Until we get to this stage at the end, we are really unlocking the idea. It's like a key in a lock. We've got the idea just right. And then you find the singular pathway that works. So that's the end of me hopefully drilling it home that we want to really, our power comes with our niche. Now, moving into the behavior mapping process, now that we've worked out our God metric, we want to figure out who our actor is. These are the particular type of people that we are wanting to get out to. So it could be an engineer, a parent, a teacher, a member of city council, maybe it's a homeowner. a car owner. There's usually more than one type of person. There could be 3, 5, 6 different types of people. Usually there's one main one, and then the others are a little bit less important. But what I want you to do now is to draw a stick figure of each one of these types of people. So just get out your pen, draw a picture of them, and then have a think through which one is probably the most important one to start with. And then we're going to go through the whole behavior mapping process now. If you were to really seriously do this for a real project and do it right through to the end, you would go through the entire behavior mapping process for every single one of those types of people and design your solution for each one of them. And it'll all intersect, but each one, you'll do something a little bit different for each of them. So once you've figured out who your target person is, and we're going to go through for the most important target person, the first step is to figure out how you will get in touch with this person. How will your target actor first see or hear your project? And you might think it sounds a little bit weird to ask the question, like, how will they first hear about it? It's a kind of a marketing question, right? To do this first. Well, this is totally crucially important to ask this question first before you even have an idea, because the nature of how you will make first contact with your target audience will completely dictate how the idea turns out. Often when you're building these projects, when you're marketing things, the job of actually attracting people to get to your idea or get to your product or to buy it or change or whatever actually is 80% of the work. If you've ever launched a product, gotten a whole bunch of customers, sold a whole lot of something, you know just how much work it is to build an audience and get it out to people and market it. And often people who have never launched something before, you've never made a landing page where you have to attract emails, you've never built a social media following, people don't truly appreciate just how much work it is to actually grab people's attention. They're not going to just turn up. Like this first contact phase of getting people on, it almost is your idea. Like it is most of the idea and it is most of the work. So that's why we try to figure this out first. And the way that you do this, it's going to completely change whatever the idea is. And the actual product that you make is probably only 10 or 20% of the work that's involved. What I'm going to do now is go through these 18 different ways that you can attract people's attention. And I used the octopus before because think about it like the tips of the octopus. When you are coming up to somebody who you've never met before, you've got the tips of the tentacles that are going to first make contact with them. What's it called? The full tentacle is the relationship building stage, and then you bring them into the head of the octopus, which is your product or your idea. So we're talking about the tips of the tentacles, people that we have never met before. So the first card in the behavior map is conversation. How do you get people to talk about it? Get one person to talk to their friends about it and invite people on. One idea I had for this was making something called the Climate Planet Origami. An origami, I put this together, that has climate questions in every single panel. So every time you fold it, it asks you a question about climate change and it stimulates this conversation, a kind of a fun way to get people to talk about it and to possibly sign up to your idea. Another idea is a type of like eco conversation cards, a little bit like tarot cards. If you have some neighbors or friends, or you're doing environmental sales anyway, you'd be like, hey, let's talk about some environmental features of your home. And then you can be like, pick a card, any card, which one are you interested in? And then what type of actions, would you like to take? Not necessarily to get them to take the action, but to just create that first conversation. Social media, we all know what social media is, but have a deeper think about if social media is your main strategy for attracting people's attention, how will you do that? What will you put in the social media that will attract people's attention, and how will you get them to sign up? There's a lot of different ways to do that. It could be a digital wall display. If you have digital screens like this, you've got billboards, small screens, big screens, wall-mounted screens everywhere. Can that be a way that you grab people's first attention? A neighbor, can you stimulate neighbors to talk to their neighbors? What idea could you come up with that would get people to do that? You could use a work presentation, go into an office and host an event as a way to get people to sign up. Any type of event. It could be like a lunch, a potluck, lecture, barbecue, game night, kids party, cooking lesson. I mean, be really creative about how you can host events as a way, not to ultimately sell the product or ultimately get the behavior. This is just to create first contact. Just to the tips of the octopus. YouTube is a great way for DIY videos. People type in how to do this, how to do that in YouTube all the time. And if you can get a YouTube video that is coming up on that search, then a lot of people will see that and then may sign up to your idea or product. Text messages. How do you get one person to text message another person to ask them to join your idea? Letterboxes. All sorts of invitations, fun things, games, projects you can print off and put in people's letterboxes to attract engagement. Emails, can you get people to sign up their friends, some sort of chain letter thing, anything? Or a retail store, can you partner with some sort of retail store or just, stand out the front or come up with an idea of a way to get in touch with people's customers at stores? Or an outdoor sign, you can put something on the street or on like a public wall. Direct message is really powerful. You can use Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn to direct message new people and invite them to be a part of your idea. A wall poster, just put anything on the wall. I've got some examples here of a climate label that I created for real estate agents to put in houses. So this could be something that is just on the wall to try to get people's attention who are buying homes to look at the climate data of that particular home to then encourage them to improve the energy efficiency, the decarbonization, electrification, solar, etc. of the home. Employer message, can you work with employers to send a message out to their employees? And so you can see by looking through all of these examples, if your approach is like social media, or your approach is community-based events, or your approach is working with employers, these three different tips of the tentacles techniques are going to create completely different startups, completely different programs, even if you're working in the same kind of theme. This is why we start with this process first. Google search, just coming up on Google, making sure you're writing blogs and landing pages that people find. Podcasts are another way. People search on the podcasting platforms, and then your podcast, or if you're a guest on another person's podcast, can actually come up and be found that way. Quite a lot of people find my podcast by typing in how to save a planet, and mine, how to save the world, comes up right under how to save the planet, which is really nice that people just find me that way. You want to just really have a think through all of those different mechanisms of first contact, of what the best way is to try to make a first touch with your target person. And so the next section we go into, which is the cue, it may or may not be the best fit for all projects. This is very time and place behavioral based. But once you've got their attention, now we have to get them to do something. This only works for projects that really need to trigger an actor in a time and a place, which is not all, but some really do need to do that particular thing. My little chestnut, how do we use LED or flashing light or color change to signal that it's time to act? This is one that is very well suited to something called demand response, which is getting people to change their electricity consumption to different times of the day that are cleaner, lower demand times of the day. And it's also what is used commonly in just things like seatbelts. When we don't have our seatbelt on, there's a chime that goes off and a flashing light that gets us to put our seatbelt on. It's a time and a place type of thing. This is a design I did up for just a small LED light that could go on appliances that would change color, signaling people to change the time of day that they're using their appliances to greener times of the day. Same principle for, you can put on EV chargers, just a colored light that signals people to change. Color is really interesting because it instantly triggers the unconscious part of the brain because it doesn't require any cognitive power to interpret what color is. If you think about language or words or shapes or any other type of communication medium, we have to sort of take a moment to think about it and interpret what it is. There's a bit of a delay, but color is truly instinctual. You can't not understand what a color is. And so it triggers people unconsciously to act in a way that other sorts of things don't. Here's the same sort of principle. It's a Nest light that is photoshopped to display color, the energy lollipop light. This is another one called Glow Energy, which again, it changed color to get people to change their energy consumption in their homes. This design I did up for schools in the UK. They were installed in Ireland to signal the carbon emissions or the electricity consumption of the schools. So these big dashboards were installed in the schools as a public education thing to encourage the students to be more energy conscious. Next one, a Facebook message. This might sound silly, but you can actually automate Facebook messages to send people specific messages at specific times. So if you need to trigger somebody to do something at a particular time, like the grid is really polluting right now, don't use electricity right now, or something else is going on, air pollution or etc., you can get Facebook to do that. phone notifications. Might sound obvious, like people use phone notifications all the time, but you can make specific apps or games that have a unique chime to them and a unique type of signal. And if you can be a bit creative about the type of notification, so it's not just another annoying thing on your phone, you can do something potentially pretty interesting with phone notifications that people are going to enjoy seeing. Emails, again, email might seem obvious, but if we're using email specifically to target a person to take an action, the way that email is formatted is potentially a pretty big deal. This is one I put together as a weekly CO2 report. It's a carbon report of your home. And then it shows you with the gamification tools, a smiley face, frowny face, whether you're going up or you're going down, tracking your progress, a tip of the week. So it's designed as a way, not just a newsletter or just regular marketing, but it's specifically designed as a report to take action, to trigger action in that moment. You can also use Twitter bots. Twitter is really cool. You can use its developer API. This is a Twitter bot that we developed that gets the data from CAISO, which is the California Independent Systems Operator. They have all the data about the electricity grid, and it creates these tweets that tweet randomly how much carbon emissions the grid is putting out in this big colored spot, and it shows a chart of the data. And it's totally automated. We don't have to do it. It's been running for years, and it just tweets out. Audio chime. Audio is hugely underutilized as a behavioral design tool. We have our microwave that chimes at us. We have our washing machine that chimes when it's finished. We have a seatbelt that chimes. And in the picture here, this is an indoor carbon dioxide screen that I designed for the schools in Ireland. And we set it to actually chime when the indoor carbon dioxide, they're in winter, they have the windows closed, the indoor carbon dioxide can get quite high, chime goes off to signal the children to go and open the window so they get more fresh air. But just to think about, how can you use sound as a way in somebody's environment to signal them to do the behavior or to take the action that you want them to take? Another one that's really exciting and I think hugely underutilized is browser notifications and Chrome extensions. You can do so much. You can basically make a tiny little app and a website inside a Chrome extension that is constantly connected to the internet, that's drawing data and can signal a flash, and it can even crawl across the screen. This is the Energy Lollipop application that we developed. It's constantly, every 5 minutes, it's updating with the carbon emissions of the grid. You can just click on it and see what the grid is doing and how much emissions it's putting out there. You can even create a creature that floats across the browser, that moves, it animates, it pops up, it can be real-time connected to data. It can do just anything that you want, like a pet or a Tamagotchi. That's a really exciting space that I'm hoping that I can do something in one day. Here's another one, dinosaur. We've got whale, dinosaur, you could do anything. Infinite potential for browser-based Chrome extensions as cute little animals that crawl across the screen. That's a short section for Q, but moving into the data. We really want to take a deep dive into the data sets that we are working with. This might be very obvious what you're working with, but it might not be. You might have many different data sets, meaning all different things in different units, different times. And if you're designing software, you really have to be very surgical and detailed in the way you're looking into your data. So what types of data? Who collects it? Where are you getting the data from? How do they collect it? Can you collect it yourself? Especially when people are working on social influence or content or creative art style of campaigns. A lot of people don't even ever look at the data at all, let alone have a simple look at it. People don't really have any idea about how much waste people make per day, or how many kilowatt hours they use, or how many tons of carbon dioxide they put out in a year or a day, or how much a car makes in a mile. There's just no deep looking into the data, but that's something that you want to do first. And there's just so much fascinating data to work with. Thermal photography, satellite photography, every type of sensor that can measure just about anything that you want, that you can code up and put together yourself. If you're committed to watching enough YouTube tutorials on how to use a Raspberry Pi and solve the electronics, you can actually make this stuff yourself. It's not that hard. And also looking into the time frequency, which is really crucial. We want to get closer to a real-time feedback loop of the data as much as possible. It's really tragic how much in sustainability our data is very infrequently updated. Maybe it's once a year, sometimes once every 2 years. It's in a PDF, it's not in an API. Occasionally we're lucky and we can get some real-time data, but it's pretty rare. We want to make sure that we can get as close to updated data, because the more the data updates, the more we can have agency over the data, the more that we can close that feedback loop. that behavioral feedback loop, that we have agency over these numbers, and that activates our dopamine reward pathway. We want to show that we're making progress towards the goal, and we need as close as we can to a real-time feedback loop to try to do that. And with all these different time instances of the data, is it yearly, monthly, weekly, daily, hourly, or in real time? Look at it and see what you can do. And we want better geographic granularity of the data. This is another thing that I think is a bit tragic about a lot of sustainability spaces, is that we often only have very coarse data that's by state. For example, air pollution, we can only get it by city. And I mean by city, I actually mean by county. Like, it's very, very coarse. And we want to be able to try to get it by property. So if you think about all the different types of data we have about green cover, air pollution, carbon emissions, fuel consumption, it's usually just by the state, maybe by the county if you're lucky. A lot of the stuff is really hard to get even by the city. And there's enormous potential for us to reduce that geographic granularity so we can get a sense that we can actually change these numbers. That's what we're trying to trigger, a sense that we can change the numbers. And you want to try to think about it in this concept of this nesting of the data, that we have the data for the entire country or the county, and then we go down, or the country, then we go down to the state, and then we go down to the city, and then we go down to the suburb, to the block, to the property. And if you want to get super, super granular, to the inch. And most data that I look at, it doesn't go past the state or the city level. We're just not getting it that granular. And so we're missing this enormous opportunity to use this data to really get people excited and about encouraging them to track that progress and get the data to the goal. So for example, with air pollution, this is a company called Aclima that works with Google cars, street cars, to drive, as they're driving around, where they have an air pollution sensor on them, and then they track property by property, meter by meter, what the air pollution is. So you get this very detailed granular map of air pollution, and you can see where the air pollution actually is. Whereas if you look at the EPA data, they only have one for an entire county. You don't get any sense of the granularity, you don't get any sense of being able to compare one property against another. So you want to look at this umbrella data. This card is called global data. I don't mean globe for the earth. I mean for the county or the industry. If you're in airlines, what is the industry? If you're in fashion, what's for that particular industry? If you're looking at, kitchen renovations, what's the kitchen renovation? What is your big umbrella sort of data set? And then if you can divide that into teams, what are the teams? I don't mean teams like swim teams. I mean like any kind of clustered group. It could be like a neighborhood or a classroom or a company. If you are looking at something that's like in an urban city sense, what's the data for the city that you're in? And then what is the individual data? Not necessarily an individual human, but it could be an individual building, an individual school, an individual company, something like that. And the reason why you want to get these components together is when you think about the way a game works, what hooks people into this intense desire to win or to achieve the goal is that you have the game. So for this example I've got on the screen now is for airlines. The game would be like the global airline industry. What are all of the airlines doing? And then within the airline, you have the teams, which are all of the airlines. And then within each airline, there are the individual planes or the individual pilots. Now, if you're just trying to work with one airline and just go in, like you're missing your entire game system that is really going to encourage people to get excited and to take action. And this whole nesting process can be applied to just about anything. Schools are perfect because you've got a school district, you've got many schools within the school district, you've got classrooms within the schools, then you've got individual kids within the classrooms, and all of that can be put together the way that football teams work together, or football teams compete, working together to their ultimate sort of grand final match. And it works perfectly with cities and counties. It's already divided that way. You've got a state, a county, you've got a city, you've got a suburb, you've got a neighborhood, you've got a block, and all of those can be compared in leaderboards using this type of gamification design. So once you've had a deep look into your data, you want to ask the question, what is the action you want your actor to take? Again, it might sound really obvious, but sometimes people just don't know what the action is, or there's hundreds of actions, or there's sometimes even thousands of actions. You want to really break it down. When I worked for the United Nations on the Global Restoration Project, they had a document with hundreds of actions in it, because to restore ecosystems, there are that many actions, but to be a really good behavior designer, you have to just pick one action to work on so you can get traction with it. So is figure out what the action is. If there are many actions, just start with one, make some progress on it, design it really well, and then add another one later. And so after you figured out what the action is, then you want to decluster the action further. Declustering is a word that I made up to try and encourage people to do this. But you want to think of like, how can you make it a little bit less broad? Say, for example, like composting. You might think, oh yeah, tell people to compost, right? That's just one action, one behavior. Well, when you actually really start to think about it, this is what the idea of declustering is. You think, well, what are all the different ways that I could compost? Well, I could compost at home, right? But then I could be at home or I could be in an apartment. So that's going to change it, whether I'm on a balcony or whether I don't even have a balcony and I'm inside, or whether I do have a garden. Or what about at work? Like, what about my sandwich crust in the office? What if I'm out at a mall? Or what if I'm just walking down the street? Or what if I'm like at a cafe? And you realize that each of these here are like, this is 6 different campaigns, 6 different products, 6 different behavioral interventions that may be vastly different to each other. If you're trying to get people who don't have balconies in apartments to compost, you need an actual like proper indoor composting unit. It's going to be completely different if you're trying to look at people to compost out on the street when they're sort of walking along on public trash cans. So as you go deeper into this, you'll start to notice how much it starts to branch out, and you want to be as narrow as possible. Here are 6 ways to niche down. You can do it by time. Is there a way to ask people to do things at different times? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, weekends. By location. If I'm looking where I live at all of Mountain View, which I was trying to figure out a campaign here, I thought, I'm just geographically, it's not niche enough. Like I thought, oh, it's just my city, my suburb, that's pretty niche. And then I thought, no, this place is huge. I need to choose one block. One block is my niche, and I will try to get these people to take on actions. And then if I'm successful at that, I will go bigger. And then there's budget. Are you working with, like, if you're working with companies or hotels or groceries, big ones, small ones, wealthy people, poorer people, just try to niche it down a little bit more. If it's by product, you're trying to get people to install solar or electric vehicle chargers or heat pumps. Just bring it down a little bit. And then there's also by profession. If you're trying to get after people, is it architects or engineers? You might think, oh yeah, architects and engineers, green building professionals. Well, they're a bit different, whether they're architects or engineers or builders or electricians. Niche down a little bit more before you get some traction. And then if there's anything that you can do with the size of the product or size of the scope in any way. So you want to get to this stage, which is one number and one action, or maybe 3 actions at the most. That's your ultimate, that's your destination. Next, we move on to progress and goals, which is all the different ways that we can display progress towards a goal. So this is really starting to get into the gamification design now. So this is going to be the last section of the session today. And then after this one, for the session number 2, we're going to jump into, which is really like the meat of what this is about, will be in the next section, which is the nudges, the gamification, the enhancers, salience enhancers, and the reward system that's really going to pull it all together. This one today is just sort of setting the basic structure up for adding all of those techniques. As I started this off talking about the dopamine reward system, coming up with a goal and tracking progress towards the goal, this is basically how we design that. We design it up now that we have our data. How do we display progress towards a goal? Simple question, yet very rarely done. This is a design of a Climate City dashboard that I did up for the city of Mountain View, not officially for the city of Mountain View. I just did it to get it on the page. But you can see at the top of this dashboard is this master progress bar, which is where we started with in terms of the metric tons of CO2 for the city per year, where we are at now, and our goal of where we want to be. You might think it sounds really obvious to put these things there, but I always put this core progress bar at the top of every design I do. I start it that way. So every single thing in the design is kind of like a child of that parent master progress bar. So we're always trying to connect the actions with moving the needle, with moving that progress bar across. And you can be so creative in the way that you design these. This is the one I did up for the United Nations of just starting to try to get my head around the issue. I was like, well, we'll start off with the progress bar. They want to restore 1 billion hectares within the next 10 years. So that's 1 billion hectares a year. So we need to track this 1 billion hectares a year. Are we making it? How are we tracking it towards the goal? So I put this together like this, but like it's a difficult data set to get. It can be gotten through satellite imagery. It's not necessarily easy to put these together in terms of the data, but at least gets everybody in the team is thinking about how do I move that progress bar forward? And that's the secret of what you want to activate. It can be done with badges. This is one I did for community groups. You've got 30 different badges to fill, 30 different households, and you want to get all of the badges filled. You want to get everybody on either EV or bike, everybody off natural gas, and everybody on solar. That is a badge-based progress bar. In this design is for the Climate City dashboard. To get the city of Mountain View fully decarbonized, there are 5 things that we really need to do, which is getting everybody on EVs, getting all the buildings off gas. Everybody needs a backup, maybe not everybody, but most people need it as a backup energy storage for the evening electricity, solar on the roof, and being part of a demand response program, which is shifting their electricity use to the cleaner times of the day. And then tracking those households. We have 30,000 households here. How are we tracking them? If my job is to try to get my city no more carbon emissions, this is what I'm looking at. I get up every day and I'm like, how are we making progress? I want to see those numbers go up. I want to see those numbers get all the way to the end. So we need to design these interfaces to do this. In this design, daily food emissions tracker was about chefs in restaurants. How do we get chefs to design menus that are made of lower carbon emissions ingredients? So a simple way to do that is to just start tracking it using color. You don't need to use fancy technology. Every day, somebody's job is to use the food carbon calculator to calculate what the carbon emissions were of the recipes for that day, and they write it on a bright colored sticky note, and the color indicates the intensity. There's a key there, whether you get red, green, orange, yellow, and then they stick it on a calendar on the wall. Basic way of bringing attention, bringing progress. This doesn't even have a nudge to it. It's just using color and the tracking of data. And then you can put them all on the wall. If you've got a 90-day pilot of a kitchen that you want to change the behavior, and you can apply this, doesn't need to be for kitchens, you can apply it for anything, any workplace, any school. Put the calendar on the wall, get the sticky notes, use color, get people to write down the data and put it on the wall. Basic attention to the numbers and tracking progress. This stuff really, really works. And a fun way that you can get more interesting in the design about this is a technique called Eat the Dots. That's how Pac-Man goes through the dots, and it's used a lot in game design. This is a game I designed up called Slug Zero, slug being the icon of the banana slug is the icon, or what's it called? No, the mascot of Santa Cruz University, for anybody who is not down with California university mascots. And in this situation, we actually have like 150 techniques to get people to go zero waste. There's a lot to learn to take into going plastic free. So instead of just giving somebody like a list of 150 actions, which is never going to work, well, maybe it'll work occasionally, but the idea is we're trying to get it to work more. You drag the slug across each one of the dots, and each one of the dots represents the amount of waste that would create. And then you have to go through each one of the dots. Each one opens up a zero waste action, and then you make your way ultimately through the progress bar to the end. So it's a much more fun, engaging way of getting people to absorb actions and information. And you can see there are literally all of these dots under each section where there actually is a lot of actions to take on. So if you think about what I was saying before, that you want to just give people one single action. Sometimes, like in this example, you wanted to get people to give up plastic, and there literally are 150 different things that you can learn if you want to give up plastic. So this is a way to give people a lot of information in a way that's broken up in different sections using this Eat the Dots technique that they can go through. And there's a desire to want to kind of like get through all of the dots, so you complete and clean the entire user interface. Star charts, sticker charts, are a great way to get people to commit to actions. It's really simple designs you can do just in PDFs on Canva, a 30-day plastic-free challenge. You can make any type of challenge and give it out to people and ask them to put stickers on a chart to get them accustomed to doing something new. And this example is using the sticker chart technique, but it's been used in a way that I feel like really hasn't been tapped into yet, which is not how to encourage people to do their own environmental behaviors, but how to ask people to ask their friends to do it. So this is where you've got like really motivated community influencer type of people. And they're like, yep, I'm down to get 5 people to compost. I'm going to ask everybody I know, my aunts, my cousins, if they want to get on solar. And I really believe tapping into this mechanism, this ability to create structured design experiences to enable people to actually start going out and asking their friends and family and their community to doing it. This is how social change happens off the backs of human relationships. So I created this basically like a sticker star chart for that type of thing. Can you get 5 houses, to get off natural gas? Can you get 5 people to put on solar? Okay, you live in a rental, you have no ability to get on solar, but maybe your parents do, or maybe your friends, maybe school teachers, anyone. Can you get 5 people to put in a food garden, get 5 people onto an EV, turn 5 people vegetarian? I mean, this is the real challenge. This is the true design challenge of creating social change, enabling change through those social relationships. Just using a simple star chart like we used to get kids to brush their teeth. And this is one that I use for myself. It's a little bit embarrassing that I do give myself this colored star chart, but this is just for my own like day-to-day behaviors. And I just find it really helps me to just keep on track of day-to-day things, yoga, email, looking after my money, keeping the house clean, things that are easy to kind of like get away from you. And I just give myself a sticker based on my performance for the day. And you can use this just simple mechanism, you can use it for anything, just about. Now, how do we display progress on a map? People do all sorts of super exciting things with data and maps, really elaborate, fabulous stuff. But one thing that we don't always do on maps that I see much less often, do I ever really see it, is tracking progress, because we're in the tracking progress towards a goal section. So in this map design, I've divided up the map into all these different blocks of 20 or 30 households each. And then not only are they divided into groups or teams, but each group is given its own progress bar, its progress to getting to zero emissions. So when you look at the map, you don't just see the data, you actually see the progress of the data. And then the blocks are ranked in terms of their progress, not just their raw data. So that's one way to do it on a map. This is one that I'm working on now, which is using a map with different badges for solar, getting off gas and going on EV, where we can actually go around to all the houses door by door, so door to door, and then give all the households a badge. And then once we've gone and gotten all this data, then we can put it on a chart and give it out to all of the households, basically the progress, tracking the progress towards the goals. So we can show the households. For the first badge here, solar, I can look on Google Satellite View and I can see solar there. So I know that that particular block, there were 3 blocks there, is at 15 houses towards the 73 houses on the block. So they're at 21% of their solar progress bar. And we're going to have to ask all of them to find out about gas and EVs, because we can't tell that by Google Satellite View. But I haven't tried this yet, but my hypothesis is that by showing people this particular progress bar and the map, that will activate this itch in them to want to get their block closer to this, ultimately completing this progress bar, in a way that I think just educating people about climate change, it just is not as strong as this type of design, although we want to put them together to really get the ultimate outcome. Now, levels. Another thing I don't really ever see done, which is a great solution for everything, that when Tamara asked her question before about how to get people in, that maybe, they're not ready for a whole lot of like detailed stuff, divide it into levels, easy, medium, and hard. You get everybody on to divided up, whatever you want people to do, into what is easy. Then the next level, they graduate to what is the medium level. And then the final stage, what is hard. This is what I did for the United Nations, where they gave me this enormous document of global restoration. And I just started to pick it apart and divide it into level 1, which were these simple, individual, easy actions. Level 2, which was how people started to influence each other. And level 3, which were these advanced professional restoration projects. And they had just like mixed it all up together. And so once I started to put it out into these 3 levels, I could actually really start to design the type of interface they wanted to bring people on, to give them an action, to ask them to commit, and then to graduate to the next level. So it starts like that. It's a bit of a big thing to go through now. Maybe I'll go through it another time when we do a special deep dive into levels. If you've got something more complex, you can divide the levels into 10 different levels. In this example, this is part of the Climate City dashboard, where we have all of the cities within Santa Clara County. And we want to get all of the cities ultimately down to zero CO2 we can divide that total CO2 into 10 different divisions, shaving off 10% each level to ultimately get up to level 10. So you have to shave off 10%, you're in level 1. When you've shaved off less than 10%, you're in level 1. You've shaved off 10 to 20%, you're in level 2. Then you get up to 30%, level 3. And then all of the cities make their way ultimately up to level 10. So every city should be designated level 1, level 2, level 3, etc. in terms of their progress, always tracking the progress towards zero emissions. And then you want to put all the goals together. What is the global goal for your industry or your city, teams, cities, and individuals, and put them together. And in terms of asking people, you want to specifically, explicitly ask people to commit to a goal, not just sort of give them a vague sort of like, this is an interesting thing, do you want to do it? And we put this phrase in the Energy Lollipop onboarding, which says your mission here is to get your home CO2 down by 50% in the next 6 months. And all the user testing, people were quite affected by this. They were like, really? You're asking me to get down by 50%? That's cool. Yeah, I'm down. And then people would get a little bit excited and they see the little chart and a smiley face and they're like, yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm excited about that. And then some people like will actually be like, no, I actually don't want to commit to that. That sounds too hard. I don't think I want to. I mean, most people that I was asking were keen for it, but there's a real psychological difference when you give someone a specific goal and you ask them to do it. Again, I don't always see that done when it could be done. And one way that you can display these goals is using like this kind of like circle progress bar. You can do it in all different ways, but one way that I've seen it done that really did work, this is with airline pilots, is that they have the goal up the top here, what you want them to achieve, and then you track it where you are to getting 100% to achieving that goal. Where are you at now? And then your whole mission is to just keep doing it, keep doing that one thing until you ultimately achieve that goal, to keep everybody on track until they actually achieve it. They actually do the behavior instead of just intellectualizing it or feeling it or caring about it or thinking about it. And that is the end of the goals, progress and goals section. I hope you'll join me next week for part 2 of the behavior mapping workshop, where we are really going to jump into the meat, the real core and all of the really exciting design examples using behavioral nudges and gamification, the enhancers, which is how to make it more fun, and the rewards. Thank you for being here.